Hello, and welcome to the Shea Hates Everything podcast, where two brothers argue about video games and other shit that matters. My name is Shea, and today I hate existential dread.
And my name's Kyle, and today I hate when I forget that we say things we hate at the top of the podcast, and I don't have anything.
That was a good recovery. Yeah, we're kind of like off schedule with these like random superlative episodes where our doc is just structured differently than our typical monthly doc, and so I, like you, always forget when we lead into this.
Yes.
And existential dread was the thing that popped into my mind, so you know where I'm coming from on this episode.
Yeah, that's just where you live now.
Yeah, that's right. But yes, this is day 3, episode 3, whatever you want to call it, of our 2024 Game of the Year Superlatives episodes, which are sort of like, not quick hits, because with us, nothing's ever quick.
That's fair.
But dedicated episodes to our favorite and sometimes least favorite aspects of our favorite and least favorite games of 2024, leading up to our actual Game of the Year top 5 games that don't suck, which will be next Monday, a couple of days from when this episode's being posted. If you have not checked out the other episodes, episodes 1, we talked about the best moments, the worst mechanics, best characters, and the okayest games. The games that were like, okay, but they deserve to be talked about. Episode 2, which posted just a few days ago, we did Best Old Game, which were our favorite games we played in 2024 that came out prior to 2024. And we talked about Best Writing, Best Music, and probably the best category, Worst Character, which was always fun. Today, we are going to be talking Best Surprise, Best Astro Bot, Best Delayed Game, which are the games that were supposed to come out in 2024, which no longer are, and Best Style, straight out of the Giant Bomb playbook. So, what do you say we talk about Best Surprise? Perfect category to kick us off.
Yeah.
These are the games that either we knew nothing about or didn't care about, or in some cases like kind of had negative opinions of during previews.
Yes.
And ended up surprising us. Thus the title. You have the first one here alphabetically. And just a reminder for folks that are jumping in for the first time. The way we're kind of doing this is not a competitive episode. It's one of the only episodes we do where there isn't arguing and competitiveness in it. We're just talking about these specific categories. Each of us is going to pick a winner in each category, but we're not going to try to agree on what a winner should be. We'll save that for our top 5, which I'm sure will be a knockdown drag out, as it always is.
But
number 1 on Best Surprise is yours.
Yeah, starting off with Abiotic Factor. This is a game that still in early access, but it became playable for the first time this year. Really came out of nowhere. It's I've talked about it on the podcast before. It's a survival game. You can play online with friends. It's cooperative, but it takes a lot of inspirations from Half-Life. Has like a little bit of like a cartoony art style, and it's all about like working in this office/laboratory where, all these experiments, ethical or unethical, are happening. It's very tongue-in-cheek, like very sarcastic in its humor and stuff, and very referential. But because it takes place in an office or in a laboratory, your armor and your weapons are made like cobbled together from various office products. Like you have a crossbow made from rubber bands that shoots pens. You have a like various other weapons, like your shield. You can put armor on your arms made out of books, like duct tape to your arms. Just like a lot of fun, weird stuff like that. It's just a super wacky time. My buddy Cody and I played it. We played through all the content that was in the game up to the point when it launched, and had an absolute blast. It's just such a strange, like it cares not for any of the traditional conventions of a survival game. It's really doing its own thing. And that, I appreciate that. That kind of like, I'm not going to call it innovation in the space, but experimentation in the space, I think is a really healthy thing for that genre. And that's only really happening in the indie space. So, game made by a very small team, independent team. Just wanted to shout it out because it was a fantastic time. I think it's a great package, and they're continuing to update it throughout the year. There's already some content that Cody and I have not played that we need to get back to playing. But yeah, that's Abiotic Factor.
Nice. I put Helldivers 2 on this list.
Yeah.
This is a game that, I didn't have negative opinions toward, but I did not play the original game. Saw the kind of scuttlebutt online of people not being super psyched about it changing from that sort of top-down twin-stick style to being a more generic third-person shooter. It looked fun. The trailers and the tone looked cool, but it was not a game that I had any intention of playing. And then it came out, and people lost their minds, including Kyle and your buddy Cody had been playing it, and you were like, you guys were like, Shea, you should go ahead and get this.
Yeah,
it's
like,
really good.
You have to get this game.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah.
It was my most played game this year on my little PlayStation Wrapped thing that they did back in December. I believe I had around 300 hours played in Helldivers 2 over the course of 9 months of the year, which is pretty insane. But yeah, it's such a fun game, and not just a surprise for me personally in that I hadn't really been paying attention, but the scope of surprise in being a game I didn't care about to my favorite gaming experience of the year is pretty large. And that in and of itself is very fun to have your game of the year be a game that you didn't even care about before it came out. Pretty crazy.
Yeah,
so,
that's
Helldivers
nice.
2, a both best surprise and a biggest surprise for me.
Yes, for sure. I agree. Helldivers 2 really, really took the world by storm in a big way.
Yeah. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is also on this list. I don't remember, Kyle, where you were coming from on this game.
I was
say for
way
myself,
higher on it before it came out than you. I was much more optimistic before it came out.
I generally have a pretty good eye for game, especially in AAA space, stuff that's going to not come together very well. I was very outspoken about Anthem prior to launch. There have been many games that I was like, no way. When everybody else is saying yes, I'm saying no, and I ended up being right. I was fucking wrong about Indiana Jones. I thought this game looked terrible almost every time we saw it. The lack of in-depth gameplay that they were willing to show really scared me off. And don't get me wrong, the tone looked on point, the writing looked on point, and Troy Baker's performance I thought was really good. But the actual it's a video game, not just a movie. What are the video game parts? I was very, very cynical about it. And I will say it can be inconsistent at times, but overall, it's so fun. And there's really nothing else like it that I have played from a gameplay perspective. The amount of variety and the difference between the stealth stuff, the puzzle solving stuff, the more straightforward action-oriented stuff, the big set-piece moments. It doesn't play like an Uncharted game,
right,
but it has elements of that. It doesn't play necessarily like a stealth game, but it has elements of that. It doesn't play like a puzzle game, but it has really, really in-depth puzzles at times. Some really solid head-scratchers. So for me personally, it was... Helldivers went from game I didn't care about to a game I love. Indiana Jones went from game I actively was telling people was going to suck to one of my favorite games of the year also. So Indiana Jones, pretty good. I know you were higher on it, but I feel like even for you, it's kind of surprising how much you liked it also.
Yeah, I was tempering my expectations. I think that's mostly because of the general discourse around it being... temper your expectations of this one, blah, blah, blah. And I had always thought that it looked like it was going to be a good time. I did not know it was going to be as good as it was, obviously. But, I trust Machine Games. I love the Wolfenstein games. So I knew there was, a really good chance I was going to like it. I obviously didn't expect to like it as much as I did.
Yeah, and I just played through Wolfenstein 1 last year. I had started it when it came out and just never finished it, and so I kind of wanted to go back to it because it was on the PlayStation Plus catalog. I think, maybe Game Pass, I don't remember. But I've actually played through the whole thing and was like, this is a good time, but it's very simple, very straightforward. The story is crazy and wacky and awesome, but the actual video game parts of it feel outdated. in fairness to the game, it came out like a decade ago, so that's understandable. But leading into Indiana Jones, I didn't look at Machine Games as like a studio that was going to be super innovative in terms of gameplay, and also the combination of studio that makes, very straightforward, hardcore, over-the-top shooters, making an Indiana Jones game, that seems odd, but they crushed it. So, hey, shame on me. I won't doubt them next time, that's for sure. Next on the list is Kunitsu-Gami. This is a game we really only checked out because we decided to make it a Game Club game the month it released because it was on Game Pass.
Right.
I found myself really into the vibe of Kunitsu-Gami. I never ended up finishing it, but I got probably halfway through, put, 8-ish hours, maybe a little bit more into it, and just really enjoyed the tone and the visual style that it had going on, all the monster designs, and it's not like a super deep... I mean, it's effectively a tower defense game where you just have different units that are single people, but there's a huge variety of them you would lock throughout the game. And then you also have some third-person action combat on top of it with this very cool sort of dancing-inspired combat style that I believe is actually based on a real like fighting style from Japan. But I guess I don't remember if it was Korea or Japan. Japan. But I just really liked it far more than I expected it to. And again, it was a game that when I saw trailers for it, I was like, this looks very pretty. And it's got an interesting sort of gameplay approach. Not really the kind of game that I enjoy playing, but we're going to check it out. And it really blew me away in a couple different categories. So well worth checking out. Next is Pepper Grinder, which is another game that I wasn't paying a ton of attention to until it released. And then I saw people kind of talking about it and decided to check it out myself. And like, I finished the whole thing in like 2 sittings. It was very addictive, very like, it's oriented like an old school Mario game where you have individual levels that you're kind of mapping to on an overworld map. But a ton of variety in the level design and kind of what you're doing. You control this giant drill to defeat enemies and kind of dig your way through, but you're digging through like dried up lava and sand, and there are underwater levels and really, really insane boss fights. And so it was just I wasn't really looking for a side-scrolling type game like this, but it came out of nowhere, at least for me, and I had a really good time with it. It's one of those that, like, in hindsight, I should have seen coming. It was a Devolver Digital game. I tend to vibe with a lot of the stuff that they put out, but for whatever reason, I just wasn't really paying attention to that one, and it was a good surprise.
Yeah, I played the demo of Pepper Grinder, and I just didn't like how it felt. I just never got into the flow of, because it's like changing speeds when you go through something versus when you come out of something, and kind of like get a little boost when you leave whatever substance it is you're going through. And I just felt like I never locked that in when I was playing the demo, and so I was kind of like, all right, I don't feel like addressing the learning curve here, and so I didn't end up getting it.
That was definitely my biggest criticism of the game. Was there are kind of 2 different mechanics that have to do with what you're talking about. There is like a speed boost you can get through specific types of materials, and they kind of outline it in this sort of teal color. And it never felt great to like press the boost at the right time to do the jump out of the thing. And then the other mechanic, it has a sort of grapple hook that you use to spin around and change direction, and doing that midair after boosting while using your momentum, it just like never totally clicked with me.
Yeah.
The game is also fairly short. It was like less than 6 hours. And so I feel like if the game had been longer, if they had added on another world full of like 6 or 7 levels, I might have gotten there. It just never totally hit for me. Yeah. That said, the rest of it was still totally amazing, and I really liked the vibe. And those 2 things, like, they weren't game breaking. It just wasn't as fluid as I maybe wanted it to be.
Sure. I added the Silent Hill 2 remake on here for obvious reasons. This was made by Bloober Team. I ended up absolutely loving it. It's like on my top 10 for sure. It was so good, and I had no reason to believe that it would be good because Bloober Team's previous projects have been bad. They've been
and
very bad.
You just got burned last year with the Resident Evil 4 remake that you didn't like. And so,
Also,
you know, despite it being a different team, it's kind of like that old survival horror style game being remade. You didn't like the last time that happened. So there was a lot against, even for me as someone who wasn't interested, looking at the gameplay and the trailers, I was like, this looks like not that good.
It looked really rough, like pre-release. And then, like, I don't know, just like once you see it in action and once your hands are on the controls and you're getting all the feedback, it feels good enough for what you're there to do. And it's really not you're doing a lot of combat, but it's not really about that. The combat's just part of the bigger picture of being in that space and having the game kind of fuck with you as you go along. So, like, hugely surprised by the Silent Hill 2 remake. And there was a statement from one of the head developers over at Bloober where he's like, hey, I think we're done making shitty games.
I remember that.
Like, he said something effective like, we figured it out. And
that's good.
Yeah, I'm like, I think it shows. And for all intents and purposes, critically, the Silent Hill 2 remake seems to have done really well as well. So, you know, I hope that since they feel they have locked it in, that enables them. Well, I know they have another game on the way.
Yeah, it's a new IP.
Yeah, that looks, you know, like sort of like some diegetic UI, Dead Space like kind of stuff, but also really weird. So interested to see where that goes. If they're able to apply some of the lessons they learned while making the Silent Hill 2 remake on that new project, that could be interesting. But obviously, the remake was a huge surprise for me.
Yeah. Next is Thank Goodness You're Here. I don't remember which one of us added this. I know for me, I hadn't heard of this game, and then I heard some people talking about it on various podcasts. You checked it out and played through it and really recommended it. And I feel like for a lot of people, it was sort of a come out of nowhere type game.
Okay.
Just wacky sense of humor. Very much, like, there are a lot of people that love this style of humor, the Monty Python style.
Right.
It isn't always my jam, but this one I really loved, and I think because it's pretty short, really made it work well for me. But, you know, we always talk about humor in games being a really hard thing to do even today, and a game that can, like, regularly make me laugh out loud while I am playing it almost never happens.
Totally.
And Thank Goodness You're Here did that very consistently.
Yeah. I mean, this is one that I knew. Like, I had seen the trailers and had heard people kind of...
Right.
Like, I want to say Tam and Lucy from GameSpot, they had... they had played it on a show floor somewhere and were like, this game fucking gets it. I was like, oh, okay, great. Because I like British humor more than you do. So I knew kind of ahead of time that I was going to be able to connect with that one. And when it came out, I just like you, I had a joyous time playing it. So it was awesome.
Yeah. It was. I remember hearing Lucy James talking about it, having played it early, and it was like, I mean, I respect her opinions on a lot of games, but also, like, she's British. Is there a little bit of a bias towards that style? Like, it's hard to take her opinion on that compared to what I might feel about it. So I was kind of like, I don't really know. But then once you recommended, I was like, okay, yeah, I should check this out.
Right. Yeah. And lastly, I added Zenless Zone Zero on here. Again, like a format for a game that I have no business enjoying. I don't like any, like, Genshin Impact or any of those fucking shitty gacha games. Like, that's just not my style. I am a huge mark for anime, but, like, I not generally anime games. I find them all to be really bad. I don't really like that Western anime JRPG style, and this is so not that. It's very much its own flavor. Combat super fast and fluid. And I mean, just the way the entire package is presented, like, coherent dialogue in cutscenes is another surprising thing, because usually it's like the dialogue in anime games tends to be really, really obtuse, or it just doesn't translate very well, or it's overly flowery or whatever. It's like if Western RPGs are like plays, Eastern RPGs are like musicals. Everything is significantly heightened. There's no sense of realism. It's all representative and not literal. And I feel like that's the way those games tend to go. And so this is that, but it has so much style and flair attacked onto it. It's all done. The whole package is presented so well. And again, like I said, the combat feels really good. And, you know, there are ways in which to engage with it that add a lot of depth in the combat. and it's not necessary to do that. You can kind of blow through if you want an easy time, but there are other activities that enable you to go deeper. There's a lot of great things about Zenless Zone Zero. Unfortunately, it is a gacha game, and that's the part where it's like, if it was $60, I probably would have never played it, but also, had I played it, I would have been having a great time and probably would have finished it. But
it is a fair point, though.
It's weird, right?
Yeah, because I'm the same way. I really loved the combat. I'm less on the sort of aesthetic than you. I do really like the style of it, but I'm less into the anime stuff than you are. But the combat I thought was so fun and inventive and tons of variety. And there's no way I would have played this if it wasn't free.
Right.
So there's something to be said about that business model for sure. But there are ways to do free to play that isn't gacha style bullshit. So I think that, to me, that's the solution, is find a different way to monetize.
Or give me an option, now that I've put 20 hours into the game, give me an option to just pay for it and get rid of all that shit.
Yeah.
How some mobile games have that, pay $10 and no more ads.
Yeah, that's true.
Something
but
like that
ads
would
is
be
kind of
nice.
different.
I know it is.
Everybody would do that. You know what I mean? If they just said free to start, pay $60, unlock everything, they would make so much less money because everybody would just pay the $60 rather than gamble in game with real money.
Yeah, I know.
So, yeah, it's a broken system.
It's all bad.
We're only going to see more of it. So, hooray!
But this was a huge surprise for me because again, I had no business liking something in that genre.
Yeah, I mean, same for me, for sure.
Right.
I was very surprised by... I only checked it out because I was bored one day. Even after hearing you talk about it, it was a couple months later, and I was sitting in front of my TV, just couldn't will myself to start anything else. And I was like, let me download ZZZ. It's free.
Right.
If nothing else, it'll give me ammo on the podcast to talk about these shitty anime games. And then I played it all weekend, and I had a ton of fun. And it was really annoying.
Yeah. Oh, man. Okay, so from that list, right, Abiotic Factory, Helldivers 2, Indiana Jones, Kunitsu-Gami, Pepper Grinder, Silent Hill 2 Remake, thank goodness you're here, Zenless Zone Zero. What is your best surprise?
I have to give it to Indiana Jones. Yeah. As much as I love Helldivers, I have to, take the L and have some accountability for... I was going hard after Indiana Jones and saying how horrible I thought it looked. And it's in my top 5 for the year. It's amazing. I've got this is my public acceptance of being wrong, is rewarding Indiana Jones with my best surprise of the year.
Thank God this is being recorded.
See, I might talk shit, but I can take it too. This is I'm being a big person right now.
Yeah, you can take it when you control the moment in time in which you take it.
Yeah. Is there a different way of doing that?
No, I don't think so.
What about you?
Yeah, mine's definitely Silent Hill 2 Remake. I think Helldivers 2 is probably another strong contender. But Silent Hill 2 Remake absolutely takes the cake because, again, I had historical precedence for this being a bad experience and a bad time.
Yep.
And it totally went the other way for me. Whereas Helldivers 2, I played that first Helldivers on PS3 and really liked it. And I was like, okay, yeah, doing that in third person, I think that makes sense. This could be fun for a week. Little did I know I'd be spending months playing it. Not as much as you, obviously, but still spending a lot of time playing it. But in terms of actually surprising me, Silent Hill 2 Remake.
Nice. Indiana Jones and Silent Hill 2. Who would have guessed?
Nice job.
All right. Moving on to Best Astro Bot. So this is just a fun one. We went through the list of all the Astro Bots. I think there are close to 9 or 200 unique Astro Bots in the game. And just pulled out some of our favorites.
Yeah.
And we'll chat about them.
Go to
going alphabetically.
Superlatives episode 2 at the beginning of the music portion to listen to some awesome Astro Bot tunes.
Yes, that's actually a great idea. We should have done that. Put on the Astro Bot soundtrack while we talk about these. Going alphabetically by their name in game.
Right.
First is Aristocratic Archaeologist, which is Lara Croft. This I just love because at the sort of home base, what's that place called? That zone called? I don't recall. But the home base of the desert where all the Astrobots hang out. she is being chased by a velociraptor, and it's really cute. It's very funny. And I also like that even though we think of Tomb Raider today as being the like newer version of Tomb Raider from 2013 and those series, this is a nice callback to the old Tomb Raiders with her going up against the dinosaurs too. So I thought that was fun.
Yeah, because like the first enemy you fight is a velociraptor, right? In the original, or no, there's a tiger.
There's a T-Rex. Yeah, you fight tigers, but there's a T-Rex, and I don't remember if it's Tomb Raider 1 or 2, but yeah.
Okay. It's been so long since I played those. All right, next one is
because they're bad.
Well, that's fair. Next one is Dad of Boy, which is Kratos. I just think the name is really funny. He's just like he's sitting on a stump, like carving something out of wood with his axe to the side. Dad of Boy is a really good name. I also like how emotive the like electronic eyes are on the Astro Bot models, but he's got like the big Kratos beard and the red stripe on his head, and he's bald. It's a really, really good one.
Yeah. Next is Echo Warrior, which is Jack and Daxter. They've got the little robot Daxter. There's you'll hear a common theme of just really cute ones on this list, because that, for me at least, that's like what I really liked about the different unique bots. But yeah, Jack and Daxter, great game series. Would love it to come back, but the cute little Robo Daxter is especially cute.
Oh, for sure. Next is Exalted Exo, which is Cade 6 from Destiny. What a fun, goofy-looking little dude. Because, like, Cade 6 has those blue eyes already, so it, like, totally works. And so he's got, like, the horn coming out. He's got this little hoodie. It's just, like, cute little dude. Like, a little chibi Cade 6.
Yeah, I like how he's... Like, so many of the Astrobots, it's like they take two different approaches. They'll have, like, a... Let's do the most realistic portrayal of this character we can in Astrobot form, or let's do like a goofy version of that. Yeah. And I like that they chose to make a realistic looking Cade 6, because he fits like really well with the original design of Cade 6. He's just like a little mini version.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Next is Legendary Soldier, big boss from Metal Gear Solid. We're alternating these, but Kyle, you should talk about Big Boss.
Oh, you're right. So I love this one. He's got his eye patch. He's got like the goatee, the bandana. He's got little hair coming up out of the bandana. And he's poking up out of the inside of a log, which is, I mean, depending on how you play Metal Gear Solid 3, you can spend a lot of time in logs, hiding from enemies, waiting for them for the opportune moment. But it's just super cute. It's a fun animation. I love that it just like looks like they glued an eye patch and a fake beard onto his face. It's really, really fun. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next one, you should take this one also.
Yes. Machine Hunter, Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn. This honestly I wanted to add because it was probably my favorite mechanic that was added for like one of the, you know, call it sponsored levels, the like big levels, the Nathan Drake, the God of War, Horizon, Loco Roco, like those big levels where you get the power-ups. I loved playing as like Aloy Astrobot, freezing time while you jump and shooting the bow and arrow. That was like one of my favorite styles of the gameplay during her level, so I wanted to call her out.
Yeah. Next one is Patriotic Porter, which is Sam Bridges from Death Stranding. I like this one because it's like an Astrobot with like the rain jacket or whatever that Sam Porter Bridges is wearing in Death Stranding. He's got the backpack. He's fully loaded up with a bunch of crates stacked super high. Also a briefcase in each hand, like struggling under the weight. And then also he has BB on the front, but it's just a tiny little Astrobot inside the carrier. And I just think that's very fun. Like a little
I did not even
BB.
notice that.
Yeah.
That is very cute.
That's fun.
Cool. Next is Raider Dude, Nathan Drake from Uncharted. This just gets a special shout out because again, you know, the shooting is fun in his level, but specifically his, you know, interaction at the home base. He's just sitting on the couch playing video games, and I just think that that's adorable. Like of all the things to do with Nathan Drake, why would you choose having him play video games?
Yeah,
it's
like
such a small
Easter
moment
at the beginning
from Uncharted 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's great. Like it totally works, and he has very expressive eyes to match sort of the sort of smarmy attitude of Nathan Drake.
Yeah.
That one's very fun.
That's a good one. Rhythmic Hacker, which is the hacker from Rez. This is a cool looking one. Like, it's all like a bunch of geometric shapes layered on top of each other to make the form, and then just like the blue Astro Bot eyes shining through. Did you play Rez, Shea?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Rez is great. I did not play Rez Infinite, the like sequel that
Right.
came out a couple years ago. But yeah, Rez is a great game, awesome music, and just very vibes based. You know, we're talking best style at the end of this episode. Rez is like one of the all-time best styles in any video game.
Right.
So yeah, I jump into the next one because I think Rez and this next one kind of go hand in hand in terms of the design. Is Ribbon Rider, who is Vibri from Vib Ribbon. This is a game that I have not played. Have you played Vib Ribbon?
No, I never have.
I really liked the both the design, because he's kind of has, or he or she, the Astro Bot kind of has the like solid black sort of polygonal design with the little bunny ear thing,
right.
like from Vib Ribbon, and the actual animation that plays in the home base one. It looks like it's sort of a 2D, I guess it's like a 2D 3D side scroller thing with him like running in place.
Oh, that's fun.
Just both the Rez Astro Bot and the Vib Ribbon Astro Bot have that very like old school, you know, polygonal, square, edgy kind of look that, you know, what I was talking about, were like, do you do a realistic Astro Bot, or do you really go for it and do the very abstract, sometimes goofy Astro Bot? These are definitely in the latter category, and they look just really, really cool. I would be jealous. Like, if I was an Astro Bot just like wearing a Nathan Drake wig, and I saw another Astro Bot who like was a character from Vib Ribbon and looked like that, I would be kind of bummed and annoyed that I was stuck with the wig.
Next up is the Royal Roller, who's the prince from Katamari. And he's got a Katamari. Look, the fun thing about the prince is he's got that like big cylindrical head and that tiny little face in the middle. And so like in this one, it's just like the little Astro Bot face peeking out with the electronic face. And then a huge Katamari next to him, and like his animation obviously is like rolling the Katamari around, and it's just like a really good time. And like reminds me of a series of games that is like one of the greatest series of games of all time, Katamari Damacy.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites to interact with at the level, just because of the giant Katamari. Next is Shiba Influencer, which is the dog from the game Humanity that came out last year before. I just loved this one because it's this like blindingly bright, white, tiny little adorable puppy. And he's so cute, and he's so small, and he's so bright, and he just looks at you. He's just very cute, and it's a dog, and I have a weakness for that, so he had to make the list.
That's fair. Next is Smartest Man Alive, which is Mimir from God of War, the reboot. Or I guess God of War is not technically a reboot. It's just a new type of game in the same franchise. But Mimir is the head that Kratos carries around on his side that like chimes in and talks. It's the Kratos Navi. And this one in particular, it's like Mimir's head just sitting on the ground, like obviously Astro Bot head, but with the beard and the horns and stuff, like set in front of a book that's on like a little stand so he can read it. Got some candles and stuff, setting the mood. It's just a fun little scene of like just a Astro Bot head plopped on the ground.
Yeah, I really liked that they went for it and just made him a head.
Right.
Very fun. Next is Spinning Marsupial, Crash Bandicoot. This one I love in particular because, like, a lot of the Astrobots look like Astrobots dressed up as the characters or wearing, like, a costume.
Yeah.
But there's something about the Crash, the way that he's wearing the little hat. He looks like a mascot, or like a character you'd see at, like, an amusement park.
Yeah.
And I think even his interaction, like, you knock the hat off, or
right.
the sort of head off at some point. And I just thought that was really funny. And I don't know. It seems like it's a weird choice for Crash because he's a goofy character.
Yeah.
But
well, he is a PlayStation mascot, right? So it's like...
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because many of the other, like we talk about Jack and Daxter, they just like, the Jack one is just him sort of wearing a Jack costume, like the clothes of Jack. And they could have done that for Crash, but instead they made him look like, you know, a sports mascot, and I just really liked that.
Yeah. Well, do you remember all those like old ads for Crash Bandicoot,
yes.
like live action ads of the dude in the Crash suit? This is what
I'm sure that's why.
Yeah, that's probably what it's from. All right, next one is Tooled Up Mechanic. This is Ratchet and Clank chilling out. Tiny little Clank is super cute.
It's a tiny little Clank, man.
It's a little Astro Bot with a tiny little like square body. Oh man, that's adorable.
Yeah, he's very cute, and I loved the because like my kids recognized Ratchet and Clank.
Oh, nice.
Because we've played through several of the games, and so that was a fun one that they like actually, so many of these characters are nostalgic from our experience growing up playing Sony games, but my kids even like recognize some of the mascots in this game, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Next is Trusty Steed, which is Aggro from Shadow of the Colossus, and they just like made it a horse.
It's just a horse. With
like there are a couple examples of them making like giant ones, like the whatever Trico from The Last Guardian. It just looks like a Trico. It's this giant Trico character. It's just a weird choice, but this one's just a black horse with one giant blue animatronic eye.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
Very strange. Next is Urban Survivor, which is the Pomeranian from Tokyo Jungle. Like, just what a weird shout. Like, Tokyo Jungle, who remembers that video game?
Right.
That's crazy. I don't remember the significance of the Pomeranian.
Neither do I. But I liked this one in particular because they follow you around. Like, once you interact with it, they'll just chase you around the whole map. And I thought that was really cute.
Yeah, that's good.
Again, it's a dog. You gotta call out the dogs. All right, few more. Next is Vengeful Spirit, which is Jin Sakai from Ghost of Tsushima. This I loved because they could have made him a badass like they did so many of the other sword-wielding characters. But no, his little interactable at the home base is him sitting in a hot spring, just chilling, his armor sitting next to him. And then when you interact with him, he like gets embarrassed and like tries to get up and look all badass. And I really liked that because Jin was not a funny, silly character at all. And so I like that they made him be one as an Astro Bot.
Yeah, that's good. Next is Watermelon Buster, which is Raiden from Metal Gear, specifically Revengeance. But this one is crazy looking because he's all wrapped up like Raiden is in his bandages and stuff. He's got like the anime white hair or gray hair. But he also has a fucking six-pack. Like, he's ripped. This Astro Bot is fucking ripped, bro. And that's crazy. He also has, like, the fake mechanical jaw like Raiden has, which is fun, too. But, yeah, that's a good one. And the very last one is Wormhole Survivor. And that's Grant from Farpoint. If people remember, Farpoint was a PSVR game. And this one's just an Astro Bot that has a PSVR headset on. Because there's nothing else interesting about that game. There's like nothing else. He shoots a bow. It's like this Astrobot's kind of got a bow and like some stuff scattered around the ground by him. But the model is basically just an Astrobot with a PSVR headset on. And it's just like...
They had to get the PSVR in there somewhere.
Yeah. And it's just like... Boy, there was nothing else about that game that was of interest, was there? I thought that was kind of funny.
It's interesting that maybe it'd be too self-referential, but if they were going to go with one that's like just in VR, why not do like Astrobot Rescue Mission? That was like the original Astrobot game, which was on PSVR. They could have just done something with that.
That's true. Like, wasn't it like big robot hands you would do stuff with in that game?
I did not play it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember.
I just know that was the first one. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right.
Which ones?
Do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah. Which one's your favorite?
We're both trying to be nice. Let the other person go. I'm going to pick Crash. I just think it's one of the dumber ones, and especially the interaction is especially dumb. And he just really stood out to me as being memorable. Like when we came up with this category, I dropped a couple in just from memory that I knew, and then I went through the page of like everything and pull out a bunch of other ones. Crash, Tomb Raider was the first one that jumped to my mind, but Crash was the second, and I just really liked it.
Yeah. Mine is definitely Patriotic Porter, the Sam Bridges one. Like the Astro BB is so crazy and weird to me. Like, because it's such a disturbing, strange visual. And to see it like rendered in this like kiddie way,
in a cute way.
It's so very strange. It makes me want a skin for the actual Death Stranding game. Like, just play as Astro Bot with Astro BB.
Awesome. Kojima would find a way to make that, like, make sense in canon, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a Strand game, so, it's like...
Of course.
It's connected to all these other
everything is
franchises,
roads, right?
And yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is a good one for the audience to participate in. So if you want, like, you have a favorite Astrobot we did not chat about, you can send us an email to info@SheaHatesEverything.com. We'd love to hear what Astrobots you enjoyed. I feel like everybody's going to have a different favorite because a lot of it goes back to, like, the nostalgia you have for the specific games.
Right.
All right, let's talk about best delayed games.
Sure.
So, really, like, games get delayed every year. We thought it would be funny to just call out games that we think might have been good had they come out this year, but no longer are. And, like, which ones are we actually excited about? So this isn't every game that was delayed into 2025 or beyond, but these are games that we were excited to play that we now will have to wait and talk about in Game of the Year 2025.
Right.
Hopefully they're good.
Or 2026.
Or 2026, yeah. First on this list alphabetically is Assassin's Creed Shadows, which was originally supposed to come out in November. It was delayed to February 14th, and then shortly before we recorded this episode, pushed again to March 20th. I no longer am super confident that this is going to be good.
I know.
I thought it looked good.
Me
I thought
too.
it looked fun. I liked the two different protagonists. I liked the time period and the aesthetic of what they were going through with all the ninja shit and the samurai shit. That seemed dope. I'm a huge fan of Ghost of Tsushima, so giving me a little bit of that flavor while I wait for Ghost of Yotai, great. But it's Ubisoft, so...
I mean, they've been teasing this one since the very first Assassin's Creed game. There's that Easter egg where it's like... I can't remember if it's like a picture or something of, so like a Japanese building on a hill or something like that. I want to say there's something like, I forget what the exact Easter egg was, but I remember playing the first Assassin's Creed and being like, oh, the next one's going to be like you're a ninja. And now here we are, 2025.
Right. It's also that's been the most requested time period.
Totally.
Like every single year that they sort of do their little survey. And ironic that they decided to wait until after Ghost of Tsushima comes out and eats their fucking lunch.
Totally.
So whatever, we'll see. I still, like, I'm not gonna, I'm not pre-ordering. I'm not an idiot. But assuming reviews are okay in the 7 to 8 range, I do intend to play it just because I like what it's going for. And I hope that it isn't bad.
Yeah, me too.
Next on the list is Avowed, which was also supposed to come out in November, now coming out February 18th, so just a couple of weeks away, about a month away from when y'all are listening to this. I am a huge Obsidian fan. I'm a huge Skyrim fan.
Of course.
I was a huge, whatever the fuck that game was called. Outer Worlds, thank you. I loved that game. It was a little bit disappointing at the time because of how much smaller in scope it was compared to Fallout, but now that they've sort of established that approach, I don't have like too big of expectations for what Avowed is going for.
Totally.
But they very smartly cast Garrus fucking Vicarian as like one of the main party members or like companions that you can recruit, and they've been showing him off a ton in the marketing, which is very much selling me even more.
Right.
So yeah, I have high expectations for the quality of Avowed, not necessarily like the scale of Avowed.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty hyped for that one.
And it's coming to Game Pass. Even better. Next up is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. This was pushed from late last year to February 11th and then got pushed back up a week to February 4th. This is interesting. So that first Kingdom Come Deliverance felt like a kind of culmination of a lot of interesting ideas about how to make a historical fiction open world RPG period piece like set in medieval times. And everything I've seen about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is like they're able to do that with a much bigger team and a much bigger budget and execute on it at a higher, more sophisticated level. And it just seems like they put a lot of attention and care into the writing. I saw a tweet about how it's they believe it is now the longest video game script in history.
That's crazy.
There was one other script that was like 2 million, close to 2 million words or something like that. And theirs is coming in at like 2.2 million words, which is absolutely insane. So like the scope of it's basically it's like Grand Theft Auto medieval, like open world, like kind of can do whatever you want and the world will respond to you in certain ways. So it has a lot of that energy, but also like layers a lot more life simulation elements on top of it. Like the combat is very interesting. Like the way you're swinging your sword, countering attacks and stuff is very kind of unique to that type of simulation game. There are a couple games that do combat like that, but nothing exactly the same because that's kind of an experimental space in terms of combat in games. And mostly relegated to the indie space as well. So to see it in a game that's like more, it has a much higher budget, presumably more development resources, is also kind of intriguing. Some stuff about the developer I don't love. Like they refuse to put black people in the first Kingdom Come Deliverance because they're like, it's not historically accurate. And it's like, well, I mean, there would have been some black people in that part of the world, or some people of different ethnic descent. And it's just a bunch of white people, and they were like they took the wrong response stance, which was double down, be very defensive, instead of like, yeah, we apologize, we promise that we're going to do better next time. That's the appropriate response that folks want to hear. But also, like, I get that they have a vision for this thing. I'm just concerned that their vision is constrained by a lack of appropriate knowledge. Like they're maybe not looking at all the right sources when it comes to their vision. But it's like I'm a little concerned about that stuff. Like, because I don't want to support that if it's the case. So like there are some caveats to my excitement.
It's hard to judge intent, especially when you don't like have all the answers, and it's not like they're going to be forthright if they're like, yeah, we're a bunch of racists. Yeah. We don't want black people in our game.
And it's like, also like even one dude responding to all this stuff.
Right.
Like,
sure.
And I mean, it's teams of people that actually make these decisions and have discussions, and you're not, like, we're not privy to those internal discussions that are happening, or how they're arriving at those conclusions, or what resources they're using to arrive at those conclusions. It's
a tricky thing where, like, I get it. They're saying, hey, historical realism, et cetera, but also you're not literally adapting history.
Right.
It's just a version of what history was like. And so you can make something a little bit different if it helps make people feel represented. You don't lose anything by doing that. So that's the part that's just kind of annoying.
Yeah.
I will say, like, I did not play the first game. This one, because I know it's got a bigger budget, bigger ambition, etc., it seems more interesting to me.
Right.
But seeing the combat, I'm a little like I just don't know about that, because it's very like chivalry, taking your time.
That's one of the things that interests me the most about it, because it's like, I could see, like, because I played a little bit of the first Kingdom Come Deliverance and found that to be really clunky, but like a more sophisticated, iterated version of that, I think could be very interesting. And like enhance my experience playing it instead of detracting from it. Like, oh no, here's another like 20-minute fight in the combat thing again, and like it doesn't quite feel right because it doesn't play like anything else. Like, hopefully, my hope is that they've streamlined a lot of those things, made it feel better, and make that like a thing that I look forward to, not a thing that I dread. My excitement for this has some caveats for those reasons, but like everything else about it is so very much up my alley that like I can't just ignore it. I do want to find out more about it.
Same.
So that's Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Next up is Nivalis. This was pushed from 2024 to spring 2025. I could see it getting pushed even further, if I'm honest. This one looks great. It was at a showcase somewhere, and I've been following it on Steam for a long time. But this is that sort of cyberpunk world, but it's made of like pixels, like 3D pixels, and everything's very blocky. And it's sort of a life sim where you run like a cyberpunk sushi shop, in like a bay or something, or like by the water. And so you're kind of doing like some shop management stuff. Like you can spend time fishing, presumably to get fish for your sushi shop. And like it has all the like shop management stuff, like setting prices and menu items and stuff. And it seems like there's also a little bit more narratively that's going on around the edges. I don't have a great grasp on like what the full scope of the project is, because I think they've only had like a couple of trailers. But I know it is like the look of it looks fantastic. It's very much up my alley that way. And then, you know, anything that is like running a shop, farming, fishing, talking to folks around town, like that's also very much my shit too. So being able to do that in that kind of a setting seems really interesting. So that's Nivalis. Next is Pragmata. I don't know if folks remember this, but this is that Capcom game that everyone thought was a Kojima game at the first trailer because of how weird it was. But it's like a little blonde girl can do psychic powers, and then she gets grabbed by an astronaut dude and they float up into space. It's fucking weird. And we haven't really seen or heard anything about it in a very long time. Originally it was supposed to come out 3 years ago in 2022, and now we just like haven't heard about it for the last couple of years. So I don't know if that means it's canceled. I don't know if that means it's been like transformed into something else. But I'd be interested to hear what's going on with that. I believe it was Capcom that was behind that one. That's Pragmata.
Next is Skate Story, which was just recently delayed. It was supposed to come out late 2024, now pushed to 2025 with no specific date. This was one of like the recent Devolver. They did their like Devolver delayed showcase or whatever. This game, so I was a Tony Hawk fan back in the day, but I have not really been interested in a revitalization of that genre of game. Like, I'm not looking to play a new Tony Hawk. I wasn't interested in the new Skate that was announced. But this game is so odd. Like, if you haven't seen anything of Skate Story, go look up a trailer. It's less of an actual, like, high score skating game, and it's more meant to replicate real skateboarding. So you're doing way more like little ollies and kickflips and a little bit of grinding. Like, you're not doing crazy 1080 huge tricks, but it's also couched in this like post-apocalyptic, you know, purgatory. The moon is the devil and he's controlling you, and you're in this like afterlife trying to kill the moon through skate tricks, and everything is super polygonal and rainbow and black and white wireframes. It has a visual style that I've never seen any game come anywhere close to.
Yeah, me neither.
And all of the music is made original for the game by, I don't remember the name of the band, but the music fucking slaps. And they did it on purpose because they knew people would want to stream it. And so they had, you know, someone just make royalty-free, license-free music that anyone can play or post YouTube videos to, which is a very cool move. So yeah, Skate Story, it's not really a genre of game that I would normally be into, but because of the style and the aesthetic, I am like very, very hyped for it.
Yeah, that's a super interesting one. I haven't seen anything on it since that like initial reveal trailer. I haven't really been following it.
Yeah.
Next up is Tales of the Shire. This is originally supposed to come out in 2024, has been pushed to March 2025. It's a like Stardew Valley, but Lord of the Rings in the Shire with hobbits.
So yeah, man. Sold.
Yeah, right. I will say
cozy game starring hobbits.
Yeah, cozy game starring hobbits. I will say I don't think it looks very good visually.
I'm with you on that.
Looks kind of shitty, which is surprising because it was they had a collaboration with Weta on it, and like they're known for their effects, digital effects. So it's just like surprising. They're going for like a painterly aesthetic, and I just don't think it's coming across quite right in the 3D realm that they're kind of working in. I think it's for me it's mostly about the fact that there's no lighting. If they threw on some lighting, I think everything would look like way better. But like as it is, all that painting texture stuff just looks really flat and strange. But yeah,
well, they delayed it, so maybe they've got time to add something on top of that.
I don't know. We'll see. But I mean, obviously, like if the game is charming and cute and fun, which I'm sure it will be, it'll still be a big success, I think. But that's an interesting one. It's like, we don't really get Lord of the Rings games anymore, and so
sure,
like to see them do a Lord of the Rings game in another genre that they haven't explored before is fun.
Yes. Yeah, the preview coverage for that one has been pretty mixed.
Yeah.
So I'm not totally convinced, but because it's, the Shire, I'm willing to give it a chance.
Sure.
Next is The Altars, which was another late 2024, now 2025 game. This is another super weird one. It actually reminds me a little bit of the movie Moon, starring Sam Rockwell, where in The Altars, it's very sci-fi, but basically you play as a character and like dozens of his clones, sort of running a space station on a planet. And I think the space station like has mobility, like it can roll or move on the ground, but there's very clearly something weird going on. But it's got sort of a combination of like city management, sort of town management, but you're all playing like yourself, and they have very distinct personalities, and like they can get in fights and argue with one another, and they disagree on things. So I'm very curious to see, once they start showing a little bit more like raw gameplay of it, how those gameplay mechanics end up moving together, and how that sort of integrates with this very weird, creepy sci-fi story they're trying to tell. But again, like I'm big on vibes when it comes to like indie trailers and the ambition of indie games. And this one was like an instant, okay, I'm going to keep my eye out on that one based upon the setup of the story.
Right. That is interesting. I think lastly, we have Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. This was originally going to come out in 2020. Yeah, so what happened with Vampire the Masquerade is, so it's a tabletop RPG, and they're making a game out of it. I think there were a couple games in the franchise, and this was supposed to be the latest one. Very ambitious, a lot of dialogue tree option stuff, but and like multiple ending and paths through, and like different allegiances with different factions and all that stuff was promised, but also promising some gameplay that's like Dishonored. And I think it was originally being made by Hardsuit Labs, which is like a support studio for a bunch of games. They're probably not the ones who should have had this, because I don't think they really have the expertise or personnel to like run a full game on their own. Development has since been moved to the Chinese room, which are the people who made Still Wake the Deep, which I really, really like. But obviously very different scopes of video games that we're talking about here. Still Wake the Deep and what's promised in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 is very different. It's now supposed to be coming in 2025. This one, it's just had a lot of problems in development, and so I'm very skeptical. I think it could be interesting. I'm not a big vampire fiction person. I find vampires to be kind of uninteresting. But if, like the promise of these like Dishonored-like systems, along with, the dial, if it's written really well and performed well and compelling, and, has like Mass Effect level dialogue options and conversation trees, and that the choices you make in conversations affect the story and your relationships with characters or various factions, that stuff is interesting enough. I didn't think Vampire was all that great. I thought probably the writing in Vampire was the best part about it. So like if Vampire the Masquerade can blend that quality, at least that level of quality of writing, with a better first person adventure action gameplay, I think it could be a recipe for success. Again, I don't know that the Chinese room is necessarily the right team for that. Certainly Hardlight Labs was not. It just seems like either this thing will never happen, or it's going to come out and be a bit of a mess, is my worry. But like, it is a thing that I am interested in conceptually.
Sure. What are you most excited for from this list? What's your best delayed game?
Probably Nivalis. I'm really, really intrigued because so there are a couple of couple like cyberpunk indie games that have been floating around that have never released, and I'm like kind of itching that. I'm like craving for something like that. And I think Nivalis is going to be a great fit for me. I think like I'm ripe for an experience like that this year. Again, I feel like the other ones I have too many caveats with, right? Like I don't know if Tales of the Shire is going to be good. I'm very unsure about Vampire Masquerade. I have a couple, we don't know anything about Pragmata, right? And I have some caveats, like I mentioned with the Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Nivalis is kind of the one that I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to really like this one.
Nice.
How about you?
Mine's, I don't know, it feels kind of corny to go with the big AAA game, but it's Avowed for me.
Sure.
Like I'm very hyped for Skate Story, very hyped for the Altars, but Avowed is like exactly what I want out of a big AAA gaming experience.
I am excited
big
for Avowed.
Open area, first person, magic shit, ranged combat, party members. Like, I already know the writing is going to be on point. Yeah, I'm very excited for Avowed for sure. I mean, I don't know that universe at all, but theoretically, or at least you would expect them to take an approach that like newcomers will be able to appreciate everything that's happening.
Yeah, I'd assume it's pretty lore agnostic.
So I'm very excited for Avowed.
Yeah, I am excited for Avowed as well. I just I guess it's, I know I'm gonna like it. It's just like the degree to which I like it that I don't know.
Yeah, I think, and maybe part of the motivating factor for being so excited for Avowed is that 2023 was not a year where games I should like were games that I did like. Dragon Age Veilguard, Star Wars Outlaws.
2024, you
like, is that? Oh, what did I say?
2023.
Hell, it was true of 2023 also, if I'm being honest. Like, a lot of the big AAA Shea style of games, I just didn't like. Either they were bad, or I just happened to not like them. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Baldur's Gate 3. Like, there are so many examples over the last couple of years of games that everybody likes that are totally my jam that I just don't like.
Right.
And Avowed feels like a pretty safe bet for it to be a game that I do like, because I've liked pretty much everything else Obsidian has made, and Skyrim, depending on the day, is like number 1, number 2 in my favorite games of all time. So Avowed has to hit, or I'm going to start getting afraid that I might not like video games anymore.
Yeah, I feel that way sometimes too.
Obviously that's not the case, but all right, those are our most anticipated of games that were delayed, whatever. Our best delayed games of 2024. Last category before we head into our top 5 next week. Best style. This is a long list, so get us started.
All right, Abiotic Factor. I talked a little bit at the top about this one. The visual aesthetic is a lot of fun. It's that like goofy, organic, strange, like office product related equipment. It's just like such a weird, unique look. But clearly like drawing inspiration from the first Half-Life. It's like they took the scientists from the first Half-Life and how kind of like wacky their lines were and how like weird they were, and really not like cranked that up and then built a whole game out of it. And I just think it looks really cool. Like everything looks like it's supposed to be there. There's nothing that stands out as being like strange or not fitting. It's all just like very found item. Eventually you encounter like some military dudes that are coming in to kind of mop the place up, and so you can get some of their gear. And like military spec stuff looks really cool, but still proportionally looks a little funny, just because it's still all within the same kind of goofy style. You can cook soups, and all the soups look fucking nasty and goopy and gross. There's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun stuff. I will say maybe something that's like a knock against it. I think the UI needs a lot of love. I think like that's still pretty rudimentary looking. So you have to use the bathroom in Abiotic Factor, and when you go to the bathroom, you have to play the poop mini game, where it's like a thing that goes back and forth, and you got to like land on the poop symbol in order to poop faster. You still poop no matter what, but you can poop faster by playing the minigame.
You know?
I know, right? And like that stuff's like really like MS Paint level rudimentary stuff. Like they need it's early access, so like, but they need a UI pass for sure. But like 3D models of stuff, like the workbenches and all your equipment and stuff, I think it looks really, really awesome.
Nice. Astro Bot's on this list. We don't need to talk a ton about Astro Bot. We've talked about Astro Bot a bunch. I will say the combination of visual fidelity and art direction is off the charts here.
It's so good.
Very often, not that those two things are like at odds, but it feels like companies prioritize one or the other. In particular, in the AAA space, they tend to prioritize fidelity, and in the indie space, they tend to prioritize art direction. Astro Bot knocks both of them so fucking far out of the park. Just like the attention to detail and the number of effects and polygons and items that can be flying around on the screen at one time without causing a dip in frame rate is pretty insane. Combine that with music that was like my favorite music of the year, as we talked about in the last episode. And just like the huge variety of places you go, level design, even like the little power-ups, how they integrate with the worlds, and how much they got out of, like, I don't know, half a dozen different power-ups that you get and different ways to use them is so fucking impressive. In a game like Astro Bot is a AAA game, right? Like, it was made by a first-party studio at Sony. It had a good budget. It was like $20 million, I think. But it doesn't feel like a AAA game because it's so creative, frankly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like a AAA game when compared to most of what Sony does. The Spider-Mans, the Uncharteds, The Last of Us, etc. This is a much smaller team with a much smaller budget than most of what Sony does. And I just hope that it encourages Sony to do more of this.
Totally.
Because holy shit, the style of this game is off the charts.
I mean, one game of the year. Like,
yeah.
That should be a good sign to them.
I would agree. I also put Balatro on this list. Probably not a surprise for anyone that's played Balatro. We haven't talked about it that much, if at all, in these awards categories. I'm not as head over heels for Balatro as a lot of people seem to be. I'm not as big a roguelike person, but one thing that I do think is incredible in the game is the style. And that comes from the sort of like creepy, otherworldly vibe that is set up by the Joker character that you're interacting with, and like the weird sort of acid trippy visuals that are happening in the background, the sort of repetitive but like trance-inducing music that plays while you're rolling different hands, even like the flavor text and the descriptions of the different cards and the Joker cards that you get, the planet cards that you get. I think all of that stuff is super cohesive and very distinct and really elevates this. Like, the description of this game is it's a roguelike poker game. Like, it's pretty easy to imagine what that might be like, because in a lot of ways, poker is like a roguelike experience. You get a new deck, you get a new hand every time, and, you know, your competitors have different hands every time. But the layer of style on top of that simple setup is what makes this game, I believe, so distinct and unique and so addictive, frankly. And it didn't get its hooks in me as much as other people because I wasn't as into the gameplay stylings. But yeah, the style, man, is very, very awesome.
Nice. I put Crow Country on here. This is a little indie game, a survival horror game, fixed camera angles a la original Resident Evil, with a graphical style that's very original PlayStation. Not like the original Resident Evil where it's attempting to be realistic. This is very much more of the style of like Final Fantasy VII with like Lego Duplo characters, if that's like a good comparison. Low poly, large shape, characters made of large shapes. Right. But then the environments are like actually really well realized and detailed within that sort of grainy PS1 texture kind of framework. I just think it all comes together really well. I think the environment design especially works for me. It takes place in this like abandoned amusement park, but it's twisted and strange in the way that first mansion is in the first Resident Evil.
Okay.
And like lots of secret things to open. It's very much a game in that style. It's wearing its inspirations on its sleeve.
Sure.
But I just think the environment design is especially creative. And I really like that old classic visual style. Anything that emulates that, I appreciate, because I always want to see more of it. And I think Crow Country kind of carves out its own version of that other games aren't doing, which I really liked.
Do you feel like the visual style competes with or maybe against the sort of like survival horror tone, or do you feel like those two things go together well?
So you would think so, but the actual
because it looks a little
design,
sillier than like a Resident Evil 1 did.
Yeah, but like the actual monster design is kind of creepy, like the way they animate, and they're all like very organic, blobby, nasty, spiky stuff. Okay. And I think they animate pretty creepily, like almost like an animatronic kind of way, which is probably intentional with the setting of it being a theme park. So I think that stuff still works pretty well. I also don't think it's meant to be really scary, because some of the tropes that it's including are a little tongue in cheek at times.
I see.
And so I think it's trying to do a few different things. I don't necessarily know that they're entirely at odds with one another, but it's definitely trying to achieve a different thing than the first Resident Evil was.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think it's good at doing that. The visual style to me does not get in the way of that. I think it supports it in a lot of ways because of it, like harkening back to a style, but also slightly higher fidelity, in specific ways. But
nice.
Nothing feels anachronistic.
Okay.
I also put Harold Halibut on here, obviously, because that's kind of like the style's kind of the one thing the game's got going for it.
Yeah.
Because I think it fails in a lot of ways as a video game. But I just, similarly to, like, thank goodness you're here, how it's like an awesome, like it's a perfect emulation of that cartoon style. Harold Halibut is a perfect emulation of that stop motion animated show style. It is so good. The dioramas are beautiful. And like you can really tell they really look handmade by someone, which I super appreciate. And I don't think that pulls you out of the experience at all. Because I feel like that's maybe a trap that you could fall into with that by making it look like a thing that's constructed. Can pull you out of it, but I don't know. Like it's the same kind of logic where you buy into, like when you're a kid, you buy into the story of Gumby. Like you're not thinking about the fact that people made it until you take a step back, right? Like when you're in it, you're in it. And so I think Harold Halibut does all that stuff really, really, really well. And there's a lot of like close-up camera angle stuff on the characters, and so you get to see like the felt texture of their clothes.
Yeah.
I just think it looks really, really terrific. Harold Halibut looks great.
Yeah, I'm really bummed that I didn't ever check that out. If it's not in the next couple of months, it'll be in the next couple of years.
Right.
Like, it's definitely a game that I've got to play for myself, even if I don't finish it, which it sounds like.
Yeah,
maybe the gameplay and the interactivity is not what it needs to be, but it's such a cool look.
Yeah.
All right, Helldivers 2. I mean, yeah, know, we talked about the music in the last episode. But even beyond that, the balance they strike between silliness and intense stuff that's happening and legit creepy vibes, overwhelming vibes, what they've done with the Illuminate faction, even plenty of times when you're fighting against the Terminids in particular, when you're getting overwhelmed, like it feels very, very intense.
Yeah.
And then you like run over a rock wrong and get launched into the air and land on your teammate and kill both of you, and then you laugh. And it's just it's such a good combination of those two very different types of experiences. And it's just a game that like encourages and kind of forces you to engage in hijinks that are super fun. I know I told so many stories this year of random interactions with the other players, and I feel like that works because the style of game that they're establishing with this sort of tongue-in-cheek, fourth wall breaking, militaristic, autocratic society that exists. So that I really love. Even on top of that, the like literal look of the game, the lighting I think is incredible. The skyboxes are incredible. Seeing the different ships in the background just pummeling the planet, it looks super cool. I think they found a lot of different distinct, somewhat expected but still distinct planets that you're on. You got sand planets with lots of cliffs, and you've got the wooded planets, right. The very famous Malevelon Creek sort of Vietnam experience that everybody had in the early days.
Yeah.
And just the huge variety of armor designs and weapon designs. I think all of them look fucking awesome. So yeah, I think this game has a very both like consistent style and just like very appealing style to the military shooter type that wants goofy shit on top of their military shooter. So I think it, super successful in that way.
Even on your spaceship, there's a breeze blowing to keep your cape moving.
Fucking right there is.
That's the kind of
That's democracy, baby.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, the game is incredibly glitchy, but usually it's fun when it's glitchy. When the game keeps crashing and you can't load into maps because you keep getting booted, that's less fun from a technical perspective, but most of it's, like a Bethesda game in a lot of respects, where when it breaks in funny ways usually.
Yeah.
All right, I also have Kunitsu-Gami. Mentioned this a little bit ago when we were talking about Best Surprise, but this game I think really is more style for me than it is gameplay.
Yeah.
I think the gameplay is solid, just not as much of what I'm going for. But I think it's a both very like beautiful while also being like hauntingly horrifying in the design of the enemies. You've got these big like lolling tongues and giant like Pac-Man mouths and these flying like dragons, sea horse looking creatures. Everything is very not neon color, but like a pastel-y sort of bright, super saturated colors on top of it. It's very creepy and also very pleasant at the same time. There's a little power-up you can equip where as you run, it plants flowers. When combining that with like slicing swords and shooting arrows through these monsters that are trying to murder the princess you're protecting, it's very dichotomous in that way, but it like totally works for me and is very much my aesthetic. So really loved the visual style and just like the tone of that mix between beauty and sort of like evil that's permeating all the different levels that you're in.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff. Like the sword stuff, like the watercolors and all that. It reminds me of what is that anime? Kimetsu no Yaiba Demon Slayer.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, where like he has like the water form sword thing where like he does a slice.
I was being sarcastic. Yeah. Do you really think I know what you're talking about?
No, but someone at home might know. But he does like
you said it as if like I was gonna catch on.
And I just kept going. I don't care.
Oh, I see. You're ignoring me. Okay.
Yeah. Who? Yeah, he does like the cool like slash with his sword. He does like different breathing or water forms or whatever, and it like trails behind his sword. That same kind of effect that you see in Kunitsu-Gami. And so I guess that's like a thing, in Japan, sure. Like a very much like their watercolor style. It's very pretty.
Yeah. It reminds me. I mean, not combat wise, but it reminds me a little bit of Okami also, with the very painterly, sort of bright, saturated colors on top of weird darkness that's seeping through the world. It's got that going for it.
Excited for that new Okami game, dude.
Hell yeah. You and Jeff Keighley, man, he's crying on stage about it.
All right, next is Mullet MadJack. Full transparency, I only played the demo for Mullet MadJack, but that's enough to know that this game just oozes style. It's all about it. So Mullet MadJack, for those who don't know, it's a game about it was an 80s neon cyberpunk synthwave aesthetic, and it's all about killing these robo dudes that have blood, ? You kill those robo dudes.
Synthetic blood.
Yeah, and every kill you get keeps you alive for a few more seconds, and you have like this smartphone looking thing that like is plugged into your bloodstream and like will kill you if you don't keep killing enemies. It's like has like a counter on the screen on this smartphone of like how long you have left to live, basically. And so like it's a very like Hotline Miami like short levels, like sprint through, do it as fast as possible, kill enemies and get out. And it's all like 2D, but the guns they're like 2D textures, but they look 3D, but they animate frame by frame, sort of like a 2D sprite would. It's like very cool looking. And I just think like the aesthetic of this is like very loud neon patterns everywhere. It's like a really, really crazy looking game. It's all about style. And like
overwhelms you with color.
Yes. Oh, like the saturation sliders are all the way up for every single color.
They broke off.
They can't bring them back down. There's no reversing it.
The only bummer about it, and I mean it's inherent because of the gameplay that they decided to create with like the time-based stuff. There's so much good art and good color in that game, but you miss so much of it because you're trying to get through it as fast as you can. Yeah, that's like a little bit of a bummer. Like I almost wish there was like after you beat the game, if you unlock a slow-mo mode that like just allows you to just run through and take your time, because you want to look at all just the cool art and shit, and that's a bit of a bummer. But even at breakneck speed, the game still looks fucking really, really rad.
Totally.
My use of the word rad was very intentional also.
Nice job.
And now for something completely different. Talk about Neva. This is not at all a best style in that it is a cool style. This game is very depressive and thoughtful and contemplative and slow and not at all like anything else we're really talking about, but I do think it has a very distinct, cohesive style. The backgrounds are very like watercolor inspired. It's not like that like pointillism, but it looks a little bit like that, where some of the art in the background is a little bit abstract. You're sort of, it's a 2D game and it animates that way. But much like Grease, that the studio made before Neva, it has that, very painterly aesthetic to it. Lots of like blooms of color, and sort of one of the themes of the game is this darkness taking over, and there becomes less and less color. And as you, gain ground and beat the bad guys away, color starts to come back to the world. And again, very similar to what you were doing in Grease and sort of discovering this internal battle that character was facing. But combining that's, visual style with the music, which is a lot of like muted pianos and very soft vocalizations and choral stuff. I just think it creates a very like specific atmosphere and emotional state of mind, which I described in the last episode as being a pleasant sadness. And even though it's not a pleasant happiness, it's a pleasant sadness, I do still think it is very, very good style, even if it's not happy, fun, crazy style.
Okay, yeah. I added No Rest for the Wicked. It's a game that came out in early access this year. It's super, super good. This is made by Moon Studios, who are the Ori and the Blind Forest people. So the art obviously is awesome.
Yeah, very cool.
Unfortunately, it's published by Private Division, and they like dissolved all their bullshit. I think that was like an Embracer thing or something. Private Division had some bad stuff happen to them through acquisitions and layoff stuff. So I don't know the status on No Rest for the Wicked. I believe this is like one of the games they are continuing to work on.
Yes, that is true.
Like one of the few projects they're still working on. But it is as a video game, it's a sort of isometric third-person action-adventure Souls-like game that has a lot more like crafting elements and stuff, and also some town building in there as well. Like upgrading a town and upgrading your equipment, and you have a house that you fill with furniture to get bonuses. It's got a bunch of different systems in it. But in terms of a visual style, right, all of those areas feel very distinct. All of those sections of the game, like the art is just, it's beautiful. It also has kind of a painterly aesthetic. And it's almost like they did painting stop motion and then sped up the frames.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of describing it.
Yeah, it's a really hard. I don't know that I've seen anything else that looks quite like it.
It has like almost a cell shaded quality to it, like very harsh edges and blacks around the different elements.
Yeah, but it's like not quite that, but yes. And like the lighting is beautiful. I think the environments look terrific. There's a lot of weather effects. Things are moving. Everything's animated. It looks terrific. The enemy design. There's some like real to coin a Firescape podcast term. There's some real fucked fuckers in that game. There's some fucked up looking dudes. Some crazy looking bosses. There's all sorts of different environments you go through, like abandoned castles, sewers, beaches, snow. I mean, there's all sorts, like a forest. There's a bunch of different kinds of environments you go through. And they also has like the complexity of environment design of a Souls game where you're unlocking shortcuts and exploring side areas and stuff, and everything just looks beautiful. And it's also like it's also very obvious what area you're in based upon the environment design around you, and all of the enemies are appropriate for the area in which they are in. They feel like they've like come out of the ground in that area. There's just some real messed up like Bloodborne type enemies in this game, and they're all the game looks really, really good. I encourage people to like look up a video or a trailer of No Rest for the Wicked. It just looks so good. There's nothing that quite looks like it. I think the way I said it first was probably the best way to say it. It looks like it was hand painted, frame by frame, and then sped up to be like 60 or whatever frames, and it just, boy howdy. I cannot wait for the next update to that, because I had such a good time. I played through all the content that's in it right now. I had such a good time with it. And a lot of my enjoyment was derived from just how like ethereally beautiful a lot of the environments and stuff are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is No Rest for the Wicked. Next up is Rise of the Golden Idol. Again, talked about this before. Speaking of games that don't look like any other games, the only other game that looks like this is Case of the Golden Idol, which is done by the same artist in the same studio. It just, man, they have a way of rendering things that are extremely unsettling. Just, man, it is so hard to describe. It's like a series, like the people are all grotesqueries. What's the word? We're like, so grotesquerie caricatures of real humans. Like they're very, very strange, and like they animate, everything moves and waves, and like nothing is still. Like when you click on a character to like blow up the scene or whatever, to like further investigate like maybe what they have on their person or in their pockets or see what they're saying, they're just, the way they animate, there's like, it's just the weirdest looking thing. But it still evokes, or sorry, not evokes, it still imparts all the information that you need to make your deductions. Sure. It just, nothing else fucking looks like this. It's so crazy looking. And I like, it's the kind of art style where when I first saw it in a trailer, I was like, I don't like that. That's no good.
It's kind of off-putting.
Yeah, very much so. But then like it really grows on you, and now I've grown to like really appreciate that style and how unique it is. Yeah. So yeah, that's Rise of the Golden Idol. It's very, very cool.
Nice. Thank goodness you're here. Great style.
Mm-hmm.
I think that visually it reminds me of like an Adventure Time or Rick and Morty kind of, where it's these like not realistic looking, like everyone's ugly on purpose, like by design, and that, you know, not similar to Rise of the Golden Idol, but maybe similar in intent, which is just make everybody look a bit like a freak. And right. I think that super works to the benefit of the game because of how goofy and over the top it is in its tone. Like similar to this style of comedy, that visual style is not always my jam, but I think those two things go really well together here because of how kooky everything you're doing is. Right. And you like it needs to be so divorced from visual reality for it to work, because inherently, like, you were playing a tiny man who is like a tenth the size of most of the other human characters. You're also yellow. You're like going through pipes, and it's a very weird game stylistically, but a very fun one, very funny.
Do you remember the sausage hole guy?
Yes.
Through the fence?
Where he's just through a fence, and he just slides
pushing sausages through it.
Yes.
It's like, oh, yeah, I have another one.
I think one of my favorite moments that we haven't talked about was the fishmonger needs help displaying his fish. And so you hop in there and jump around on the fish, and you just poke cigarettes out of all of them. Yeah. And he's like, oh yes, that's perfect. that's what he wants his fish to look like. They'll have cigarettes in their mouths.
Yeah, they're all smoking.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
All right, next is Plucky Squire. This one's like I'm a bit back and forth, because I think when you're in the book, it looks amazing. It looks like literally like an animated storybook with the turning pages, the narration, the really harsh, color changes, and the character designs all feel very kiddie and dynamic and, like artistically rendered. And then you get out of the book into the real world, and it's just like lower quality 3D models that's just like way less exciting. And it's an indie game, right? Like they clearly spent a big portion of their artistic direction on the actual storybook, but I do think that 3D stuff is pretty underwhelming visually. However, the huge variety of 2D things, because even once you get out into 3D space, they get you back into 2D for a bunch of different types of mechanics. There are like boss battles, there's a section where you jump onto a coffee mug and you're doing like a side-scrolling sort of like Contra-esque, bullet hell shooter style thing. They have like a little reso gun thing where you're rescuing people and flying a big ship. And all of that stuff I think is very, very cool. But again, it's like the 2D stuff, even if it's existing in a 3D world. So I think the 3D stuff is let down, or I should say, the awesome 2D stuff is let down by the mediocre 3D stuff. But all in all, I was very into the style of Plucky Squire. Because also, like, when you think style, it's the tone and the writing and the world building and how that affects the visual style. And I think those things go really well together.
Yeah. I put Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 on here. This game's got style. Like, you might think, oh, just Gears of War, but like, have you seen those shoulders? It's so much
better than Gears of War, dude.
Have you seen those shoulders?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
The style is
giant feet.
Insane. Like, I'm not going to read a Warhammer book.
Right.
But I'm very much into the Warhammer shit now that I've played Space Marine 2.
Yeah, giant space cathedrals.
Yes, dude. The gothic stuff mixed with the sci-fi stuff, mixed with the like organic stuff that's going on. It's crazy.
It's real good. Space Marine
very
2
dark.
Looks really good.
It looks really good. I mean, the fidelity is great, and the sense of scale that they are able to find is very impressive.
Right.
But to me, it's like the art direction is what takes it over the top.
100%. It's super
Everything
good.
has a point on it. Like, there's a point on everything. All of your armor and your helmets and, like, the fences. And it's that gothic style. Like, everything's super pointy.
Yeah. And then, like,
that's why they need to wear the giant armor. They'd be cutting themselves constantly.
That's true. And then, like, everything's old and dilapidated and overrun, like, on the planets that you go to. And, like, everything's just grungy.
Yeah. It's all dirty.
Yeah, that game looks great.
The Forever War, man. You don't have a lot of time to clean stuff.
That's true. Lastly, the last nominee for Best Style is Zenless Zone Zero. Shocker. Like I mentioned before, this game just looks terrific. The animation is so good. It's so much better than basically any other anime game I've ever played. Animations are fluid, they're dynamic, they're fun, they're colorful. It has like a lot of like visual what's the right word? Like visual combat effects, like
the particle effects and stuff?
Yeah, like particle effects and stuff that are all cell shaded that look awesome. That are popping as you like fire your gun or smash your hammers or whatever you're doing.
Dude, switching characters. Like switching characters
like
feels good because
zapping
it
in and
looks
out.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great effects on top of everything for sure.
Right, yeah. And like the environments look pretty good too. I mean they're relatively simple in terms of structure, but they're well, rendered, and like the game has like a really smooth look. Like everything looks smooth. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but if you look at pictures, you'll know what I mean. Like that hub world you run around in, the little dungeons you go through, everything looks smooth.
That's the only thing that I would say, though, is like I feel like the hub world stuff feels very bland by comparison because the levels that you're in are so frenetic and like over the top. I get why they do it this way, and it looks consistent to the other stuff, but because you're so dynamic and running around in all these worlds and all this crazy shit's popping off, that when you're in the little hub area, just like slightly jogging from vendor to vendor, it just, I don't know, it's boring in my opinion.
Sure, yeah. Because it's got that kind of persona setup, right? Like, oh, it's the real world, but all this other crazy shit's happening in these other dimensions that you're going to.
It's definitely intentional. I just like it when we talk about best style, the like level stuff is definitely best style. The stuff where you're in the hubs, I feel like almost has no style.
Yeah. I do really like that you run a fucking Hollywood video. And like all of the like fake movie cover art is all really fun.
Yes.
That stuff's really neat too. And then when you're actually in those dungeons, like the CRT computer screen, like architect from the Matrix setup that you have. Where it's just like a bunch of CRTs all stacked on top of each other, and those are the tiles of the dungeon, and you're like running through and doing that stuff. That stuff looks so good. That presentation is awesome.
I forgot about that stuff. It's got like a little bit of like Ready Player One kind of vibe to it. In that
a little
way.
bit, yeah. Man, Zenless Zone Zero looks really like. I'm not gonna go back and play it because I don't want to play a gacha game, and that bums me out because I liked being in that space playing it because it like we mentioned before, the combat looks great, plays great. Like it the way it tells its story, it has I remember you saying on the podcast you didn't like this, but I like that it has a lot of different ways in which it presents the story to you, like fully animated cutscenes, like fully animated and voiced cutscenes. It also has animated cutscenes with just like text dialogue. It has like just like the floating heads, the 2D models appearing with just the text. Sometimes that's voiced, sometimes that's not. So it's inconsistent, but I feel like they're cycling through that to kind of keep it fresh, and I appreciated it. I wasn't bothered by it, but I can understand where you were coming from, where you didn't love that inconsistency as much.
Yeah, it made it hard for me to like get to know the characters because I was spending more time like trying to keep up. And if there was less dialogue and interaction, it would have bothered me less. But like when you're in that hub area, they're just hitting you constantly with like character interactions and conversations, even in the beginning of the game, that like I just, my eyes didn't know where to look for the subtitles because of that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So what wins? What video game had the best style of 2024?
For me, it's
that's
Harold
a long
Halibut.
list. Like that's like maybe the most nominees of any category we've done.
I'm giving mine to Harold Halibut.
I like that. That makes me even more excited to go check it out.
That's really great. Earned it. It looks awesome.
I don't know what to choose. Yes, I do. I just feel like it's less of an interesting answer, but I feel like it is true. It's Astro Bot. I think Astro Bot has the best style.
I think that's fair. I think that's totally fine.
Yes, I just feel like it's kind of the obvious answer.
Okay.
Like I want to say Balatro. I feel like a lot of people would say Balatro, and that would definitely be maybe like number 2. That would be my runner-up, but I think Astro Bot is the best style.
Okay.
Music, visuals, fidelity, gameplay variety as it works with the world design. They fucking crushed that game.
Yeah. A lot of good looking games this year.
Yeah. And not just good looking, but like good. They did a
games
good
that
job.
Look good.
Well, yes. Combining visuals and audio design and gameplay all together, like the aesthetic and the vibe of it. Like that's not an easy thing to nail because you need like it's like a circle with different points. That's a bad metaphor, but like in order for style to work, you need to execute a bunch of different things well. Like different teams worked on these different elements, right?
Right.
And all of those things to come together to create a cohesive package is very, very hard to do.
Yeah.
So that I think
that speaks highly of the directors.
That's true. Yeah, I would agree. And I feel like that's what made, for me at least, like that's what made this a good final category. Because we're not doing Game of the Year on this podcast. But when we think about the visuals, music, all that different stuff together, that's what creates a good style. So yeah, in a lot of ways, these games on here have a lot of our favorite elements that we may have not even talked about.
Totally.
But that's it. We talked about so many different things, so many different games.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for listening. We wanted to try this out and really kind of blow up our Game of the Year. If y'all enjoyed this, send us an email, info@sheahateseverything.com. You can also leave us a rating and review on the podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast, or on YouTube if you're joining us over there. Shea Hates Everything. Leave a comment, subscribe, etc., etc. Your feedback would be awesome on this format if it was fun. And it'll be interesting to see once we get to our top 5 if we look back on any of these conversations as like justification, or in many cases maybe like, well, you said this on this other podcast, so I don't know. You said this thing was better than this other thing at this thing, so I don't know. That's definitely going to happen. But yeah, keep an eye out and an ear out for our Games That Don't Suck 2024, which will be posting on Monday, what's the date? 17, 18, 19, 20th of January. And that's it. We can wrap this baby up. I'll say, my name is Shea, and today I don't hate some of the shit we're cooking up this year for this podcast. We're not going to get into it. We don't want to spoil things, but we have very, very big plans for this year that I am very hyped about.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm gonna choose the same one.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good year.
We'll hopefully
be a good year for the podcast.
Yeah, we'll hopefully be talking about it on the next flagship podcast.
Oh, we definitely will. Yes.
Yeah.
So if you weren't intending on listening to our February podcast, you should, because now you know. We're going to talk about some of those plans, baby.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's going to do it. Thank you all for listening, and we will be back in just a couple short days with our top 5 games of the year. Peace out.